I never thought I'd be telling this story, much less living it. If someone had told me 10 years ago that the very boy I helped raise would one day turn my world upside down, I would have laughed it off. But life has a cruel sense of irony. I suppose that's how betrayal works. It slips in through the cracks of love and familiarity, wrapping itself in innocence until it's too late to stop it. My name is Caroline. I'm 49, the second wife of George Whitmore, a successful but aging real estate magnate. When I married George 16 years ago, I knew I was stepping into a family with deep roots and complicated branches. I was 33, vibrant, and in love with the idea of building a life that felt safe, mature, and anchored. George was older, 62 now, but back then, he was charismatic, dependable, and carried the weight of old money with effortless grace. George had one son from his first marriage, and that son had Liam. Liam. Even his name used to make me smile. He was just a boy when I met him, barely 13, awkward, angry, already showing signs of rebellion. His mother had walked out on him when he was 9. His father, George's son, was too busy chasing his own demons to parent. That left Liam adrift, and in a moment of what felt like moral duty, George took him in. But George wasn't much of a nurturer. That responsibility fell to me. I never had children of my own. So when Liam moved into our home, I poured all of my care into him. I cooked for him, helped him with school projects, and stayed up with him during his late-night meltdowns. Slowly, the resentment in his eyes began to soften. He started calling me Carrie, a nickname only he ever used. I cherished it. He became more than a stepson. He was family. He was mine in a way. Years passed. Liam moved away for college. George and I settled into a quiet rhythm, comfortable but distant. He spent more and more time traveling for work or playing golf with old friends. I stayed behind in our sprawling home, tending the garden, hosting the occasional charity event, and watching the seasons change through tall glass windows. We were content, though not exactly close. Then, earlier this year, Liam returned. He was 25 now, fresh out of grad school, full of ambition, and unsure of his next steps. George offered him a few months of respite in our guest house while he figured things out. I was delighted to have him back. At first, it felt like watching a flower bloom overnight. He had grown taller, broader in the shoulders, his boyish features now sculpted and mature. But it wasn't just his looks that had changed. He spoke with confidence, carried himself with an easy charm that turned heads. I was proud, but beneath that pride, something else stirred. He'd flash me that old crooked smile, the same one from his teenage years, but now it lingered longer. When he hugged me hello, his touch lingered too. I chalked it up to affection, to our shared history. I convinced myself it was nothing more. It was on a Sunday afternoon that I first felt unnerved. I was in the kitchen, arranging roses in a vase, when I felt him behind me. "You always did have good taste in flowers," he said, his voice lower than I remembered. I turned and laughed, but it came out awkwardly. "Well, I've had a lot of practice." He leaned closer, brushing a fallen petal from my shoulder. "You look good, Carrie. Better than ever." It was just a compliment, but something in the way he said it made the room feel warmer, tighter. I looked away quickly and muttered a thank you, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. That night, I lay awake beside George, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was slow, even. We hadn't made love in months, maybe longer. I'd stopped keeping track. Somewhere along the way, our intimacy had faded, replaced by shared routines and polite conversations. The next few weeks blurred into a strange mix of comfort and tension. Liam would help me with groceries, offer to fix things around the house, or sit beside me during movies while George was out. And yet, every time our hands accidentally brushed or he leaned in too close, I felt an electricity that scared me. He had a girlfriend, Jenna. Sweet girl, polite, beautiful in that effortless, glowing way that youth often is. She visited on weekends and I watched them together, laughing, kissing, holding hands. And yet, when she wasn't looking, I caught Liam watching me. Not like a stepson. Not like family. One afternoon, as I was watering the hydrangeas near the sunroom, Martha, my oldest friend, stopped by. "You look flushed," she said, sipping her tea. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Just a little warm, that's all." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't lie to me, Caroline. You're not just flushed. You're rattled." I bit my lip, debating how much to say. "It's Liam. He's different. More mature. Confident. And I think he flirts with me sometimes." Martha blinked, then sat her cup down gently. "Caroline, you helped raise that boy." "I know. That's what makes this so confusing. I'm probably imagining it." "Are you?" she asked, voice soft. "Or, are you lonely?" The question landed like a stone in my chest. I said nothing. The truth is, I was lonely. George, for all his kindness, was more partner than lover now. We lived parallel lives under the same roof. And here was Liam, attentive, warm, and familiar in ways no stranger could ever be. But it was wrong. God, I knew it was wrong. Still, as the days slipped by, I couldn't deny the growing knot in my stomach whenever I was alone with him. The glances, the closeness, the quiet pauses in our conversations that felt like invitations. I started avoiding him, excusing myself early, locking my bedroom door, small, defensive actions to protect a boundary I knew was already fraying. One evening, I stood on the back porch watching the sky bleed into dusk. Liam stepped beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Do you remember when you taught me to cook spaghetti?" he asked, voice light. I smiled. "You burned the noodles." He chuckled. "I did. But you were patient with me." I never forgot that. We stood in silence for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, he added, "You are the first woman who ever made me feel seen." The words hung between us like smoke. I turned to face him, my heart hammering in my chest. "Liam." But he didn't wait for me to finish. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers grazing my cheek. I stepped back. "I should go inside," I said quickly, retreating before I lost my resolve. Inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathless, horrified at how close I'd let the line blur. I told myself it was just a moment, a mistake, one I wouldn't let repeat. But deep down, something in me knew this was only the beginning, and the worst was yet to come. For days, I avoided being alone with him. I busied myself with errands I didn't need to run. I volunteered for charity luncheons I normally declined. I found excuses, any excuse, not to be home when Liam was. And when I couldn't avoid him, I kept my words clipped and my eyes elsewhere, hoping my distance would redraw the line we had come dangerously close to crossing. But Liam, he was relentless in a quiet, calculated way. He didn't press, didn't speak of that night, yet everything in his posture and gaze told me it hadn't been forgotten. His presence had become a storm cloud I couldn't escape, always there, hovering, waiting to break. It was a Wednesday when the line finally broke. George had left for a real estate conference in Chicago. 3 days, maybe 4. Jenna was supposed to come by that evening, but she'd canceled last minute due to a work emergency. That left just Liam and me, alone in the house. I told myself it was fine. I had plans, dinner, a movie, an early bedtime. Liam, of course, had other ideas. "Thought we could have a drink," he said, holding up a bottle of red wine as I stepped into the living room after dinner. "To old times. To spaghetti noodles and patient lessons." I hesitated, but the smile he wore was so familiar, boyish, disarming. I sighed. 1 glass. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. I kept the throw blanket over my lap, like a shield. He poured the wine, handed me a glass, and raised his own. "To Carrie," he said, "for being the glue that held this family together." I laughed softly, embarrassed. "That's dramatic." "Not really," he said. "You raised me when no one else gave a damn. That means something." I sipped the wine, nodding. "You've grown into a fine man, Liam. I'm proud of you." He set his glass down, leaned forward slightly. "Do you ever think about what might have been different if we weren't related?" My hand froze on the glass. My heart dropped. Liam, I said, warning in my tone. He didn't flinch. I'm serious. If I wasn't George's grandson, if you weren't my— I am your step-grandmother, I interrupted, trying to sound firm. We are family. You're not blood, he countered, voice low. You never were. And we both know what's happening between us isn't about family. I stood up, heart racing. This is a line we are not crossing. He stood too, stepping toward me slowly. We already did, Carrie. That night on the porch? You felt it. You leaned into it. I walked away from it, I said, voice trembling. And you need to respect that.
He took another step.
I backed up. I've spent years wanting to be near you, he said, the heat in his voice rising. You were everything I needed growing up. You still are. Don't pretend you don't feel it. Stop, I said, my hand raised. Please, Liam. Just stop. But he didn't. He crossed the distance between us, his hand brushing my arm, his eyes burning into mine. And for one horrible, beautiful second, I didn't move. The kiss was sudden, soft, then deep, urgent, and I let it happen. I let it happen because I was lonely, because I had missed feeling wanted, because the man I married hadn't looked at me like that in years, because Liam knew me in a way George never had. It didn't matter that it was wrong. In that moment, all that mattered was that it was real. The next morning, I woke in my bed alone. The weight of what I'd done sank in like concrete. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the lines on my palms, wondering how something that had felt so vivid could also feel so destructive. Downstairs, Liam acted like nothing had changed. He made coffee, asked me how I slept. His ease, his confidence, it terrified me. I can't do this, I said, unable to meet his eyes. He stepped closer. We already did. I was weak, I said. I should have known better. You were honest, he replied, brushing a knuckle against my cheek. That's what matters. I pulled away. This has to stop, Liam. We can't go further. Not another step. He didn't argue, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Possessiveness. Obsession. Maybe even a touch of victory. I thought I had ended it. I hadn't. Over the next few days, he kept his distance physically, but emotionally, he was everywhere. He lingered in doorways. He watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. And every touch, every accidental brush of fingers, sent sparks that left me breathless and ashamed. Then Jenna returned. Her presence was like a splash of cold water. Seeing them together, her hand in his, her laughter echoing down the hallway, made me nauseous. I avoided her out of guilt, avoided him out of fear. But guilt is a heavy thing. It buries itself in your spine, in your breath. It turned my stomach every time she smiled at me. She didn't know. She trusted me. I had betrayed her too. And George, he returned from his trip a day early. He brought me a silk scarf from Chicago, kissed me on the cheek, and told me he missed me. That night, we sat around the dinner table, George, Liam, Jenna, and me. I looked at each of them and felt like I was suffocating. I had become the villain in my own life. Later, when I was cleaning up the dishes, Liam brushed past me and whispered, "I miss you." I dropped a plate. It shattered at my feet. George and Jenna rushed in, concerned. I told them I was tired. Just clumsy. Liam stood silently behind them, a faint smile tugging at his lips. That night, I locked my bedroom door. Then I sat in the dark for hours, staring out the window. I had crossed the line. And no matter how badly I wanted to redraw it, it was already gone. But one thing was certain. If this continued, someone was going to find out. And when they did, everything would fall apart. Secrets don't stay buried. Not in a house like ours. The Whitmore estate was all polished surfaces and heavy silence, where whispers carried through walls and footsteps echoed even on carpeted stairs. For weeks, I tried to move through it like a ghost, clinging to routine, pretending that life hadn't fractured in a single, forbidden night. But every glance, every encounter with Liam tightened the noose I'd fashioned with my own hands. And then it began to unravel. It started subtly. Jenna grew distant. I noticed it first when she stopped staying the night. She'd always been comfortable in our home, drinking tea with me in the mornings, draping her coat over the same chair in the hallway. But now she came less often. When she did, her eyes flicked around the house like she was trying to spot something out of place. And I felt it. Her gaze lingered too long on me, her smile too polite, too thin. One evening, after dinner, she lingered in the kitchen while Liam excused himself to take a call. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice oddly flat. I turned from the sink. "Of course. Has something happened between you and Liam?" The question hit me like a slap. I laughed too quickly.
What?
"No. Why would you ask that?" She didn't answer, just stared. Her fingers were clenched tightly around her glass of water. "I've known you for years, Carrie," she said quietly. "You were always like a mentor to me. But lately, I don't know. Something's changed."
Between you?
I can feel it. Panic surged through me. My mouth went dry. I forced composure. "You're imagining things," I said, too softly. But even as I said it, I could feel the lie twisting between us like smoke. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My marriage had become a hollow shell, my conscience a cracked mirror. And Liam, he wasn't a boy anymore. He knew what he was doing. He'd begun to weaponize my silence. 2 days later, George received an anonymous email. It had no body, no signature, just a subject line and an image. The subject read, "Do you really know what happens in your house?" The image was a grainy screenshot, clearly from our security system, showing Liam and me in the hallway. Too close. Too intimate. His hand was on my lower back, my face tilted toward his. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. George called me into his study. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply showed me the image on his tablet and asked, "What is this?" I stared at it. My hands trembled. "It's nothing." A moment taken out of context. "Are you having an affair with Liam?" he asked flatly. "No," I lied, my voice a broken whisper. "Of course not." He studied me for a long time, his eyes unreadable. Then, quietly, he said, "I want him out. Today." I nodded, too ashamed to argue. The air between us felt glacial. That was the moment I knew. I hadn't just betrayed him. I had destroyed him. I found Liam packing in the guest house. He looked unbothered, humming softly as he shoved clothes into a duffel. "You told him," he said without turning around. "No," I said, hollow. "He found out. There was a photo. Someone sent it." He finally faced me. "Jenna," he said with a shrug. I figured she knew. "You used me," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. He laughed softly. "You used me too. Don't act like you were a victim. You wanted it as much as I did." I felt sick. "You should go." He stepped closer, eyes dark and unreadable. "You'll miss me. I'll live." He smiled slow, cold. "You never did know how to say no to me." I didn't respond. I just turned and left. George barely looked at me for the rest of the day. He slept in the guest room. Jenna didn't return any of my calls. And Liam, he was gone. But the damage lingered like a bruise. Over the next week, whispers began circling among our social circle. I could see it in the way people paused when I entered a room, the sudden hush in conversations, the pity in their eyes. I was no longer Caroline Whitmore, the elegant philanthropist, the graceful hostess. I was the woman who seduced her step-grandson. And worse, I was the woman who let him. One evening, George sat across from me at dinner, pushing his food around his plate. "I need space," he said finally. "Time to think. I've rented a place in the city." I nodded. "I understand." He stood, gathering his keys. "I don't hate you, Caroline. But I don't know who you are anymore." When the door closed behind him, the house felt cavernous. Empty in a way it had never felt before. I wandered through the rooms that night, rooms I once filled with warmth and laughter, and found only shadows. In the guest house, Liam had left behind a single shirt hanging in the closet. I pressed it to my face and cried. Not for him, but for the woman I used to be. The following morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name on the envelope. Inside was a single sentence, printed in bold black ink. This is only the beginning. No signature. No explanation. Just that threat, cold and ominous. And that's when I knew. Someone else knew what happened. Someone who wasn't done with me yet.